Hello, my name is Kristen Chase, and this is my synthesis PowerPoint presentation for NU 605. The title of my presentation will be The Change in My Nursing Role, Becoming a Nurse Practitioner. I decided to use option 1 from the Moodle site for this assignment. So during this discussion, during my presentation, I will discuss things such as theories of leadership, communication, team building, a change model, and then I will be applying Lewin's change model to my situation. Theories of leadership. Throughout the course, I've learned many different theories of leadership, which was very interesting to me, especially considering what has been happening most recently in the past 5 years in our country. So it was very interesting to look at all the different theories or models of leadership. And there have obviously been different leadership theories developed throughout time. In our book, they talked about leadership as a collection of traits, leadership as an ability, leadership as a skill, leadership is a behavior, and leadership is a relationship. The first one, leadership is a collection of traits, is the first model. This theory says that a leader is born with certain traits that he or she has. Throughout the years, there's been many different traits listed, some of them added, some of them taken away, but the current research lists 5 common traits, and the traits are intelligence. The traits are intelligence, self-confidence, determination, integrity, and sociability. Leadership is an ability is another theory. This obviously has something to do with the person having the capacity to lead, and this capacity can be learned. Leadership is a skill is the next theory. Leadership can be viewed as, leader can be viewed as a competency to get things done. There's a great quote in Northhouse that I think kind of sums up the whole theory of this theory. Skilled leaders are competent people who know the means and methods for carrying out their responsibilities. Leadership is a behavior. This theory is concerned with what leaders do. It's also concerned with how leaders behave towards people in different situations. This one's very interesting because behaviors are visible and they can be tracked. Leadership is a relationship. This one really kind of, I like this theory. It focuses on the relationship that the leader has with his or her followers. It's mainly concerned or mentions that leaders have to work with their followers in a collaborative manner in order to get their goals and tasks completed. The other very interesting part of the theory is that it mentions that the leaders affect their followers, and that their followers also affect their leaders. I've learned a lot from these leadership theories. It was really interesting at the beginning of the course because we had to take a survey from the North House textbook that sort of let us know how our leadership, how our view of leadership leans towards. And so after I took the survey, it showed that my leadership leanings were that I viewed leadership as a skill, a behavior, and a relationship. And when I think about leadership and kind of how I want to be led in a certain situation, that assessment feels correct to me. Communication, I think, is so important when it comes to leadership. And from the course, I've learned that leadership is definitely a process. It's influenced by internal and external variables. And there is two figures in our textbook that Vertano illustrates these internal and external variables and how they interact with one another. This slide shows two of the illustrations from our textbooks that I was talking about a moment ago. The top one shows the internal variables. Me as a person is in the middle of the illustration, and it shows such internal variables such as thoughts, feelings, perceptions, values, experiences, education, roles, skills, and ability, gender, genetics, culture, upbringing, and history, personality, voice, perception, and style. And then the bottom one shows both the internal and external variables. So it starts out with me, or you. Your voice, body language, facial expression, eye contact, demeanor, and behavior. Those are internal variables that are under your control, which are also influenced by the situation or circumstances where you have to communicate. Those are external influences that you don't have under your control, and then others, which are also external, which you don't have under your control. I really kind of like these illustrations because it really kind of shows you how these external and internal variables interact with one another. I was really kind of pleasantly surprised that a book by Marshall B. Rosen, PhD, called Nonviolent Communication was mentioned in one of the textbooks. He wrote a textbook, he not a textbook, but a book describing how you can communicate with being less violent or less harsh, I guess you can say. It's a very interesting book that I suggest everybody read. But basically he gives how to communicate with people using for 4 steps, 4 things that you should mention in your communication. And there's such thing, and it's, according to the slide, it's making an observation. Then you express a feeling, and then you state what is needed, and then you make a request of the person, stating how they can help to provide the need that you have stated. The book goes into it with fascinating detail, describing words and how you should phrase this type of communication. It even goes into such things as what are feelings and what are some of the needs. It's really a great book. Team building. That's described in team building in our textbooks. The one that really sparked my interest was about meetings. I've been to a lot of meetings in my nursing career, and I found that most meetings are just not necessary, not run very well. There was a quote in our book that, not really a quote, but they mentioned that the most common reason why meetings are not successful is that the reason is not clear. And the textbook gives 4 main reasons of reasons for a meeting. There are things such as information sharing, opinion seeking, problem solving, and strategy forming. Some things I've realized. In the textbook, it mentioned that ship report can be seen as a meeting, which is something that I never really thought of as a ship report being. But I think they're right. It is a meeting. They classified it as an information sharing meeting with the next provider. And after some thought, I've also kind of concluded too that provider meetings with patient's family, or even a provider like a doctor or a nurse practitioner talking to a patient or a patient's family, could also be described as a meeting too. I sort of, from the definitions provided in the slides before, it sort of seems that those meetings are strategy forming meetings. Change models. There are many change models that are presented in the textbook and that we had in class also. But the one change model that really kind of spoke to me was Lewin's change process. The other change models I felt were were good, but they really kind of focused on change in a organization system. And Lewin's change process is broad enough to really, I think, kind of be applied to anyone, any situation. So anyways, Lewin's change process kind of is in 3 steps. The first one is unfreezing, where you're creating motivation and readiness for change. The next step is moving, which is the process to is progressing, to a new behavior. And then refreezing, which is when the new behavior is finally integrated into the value system. Some important points to Lewin's change process that were mentioned. The first one is that this change process is not linear. So even though in the slide before it showed arrows pointing to each step, it doesn't necessarily mean that you can't go back to one of those steps. And the other important point is that there are forces that can both drive and resist change, which can be identified and fostered. And lastly, I would like to look at my role change from becoming a staff nurse to a nurse practitioner using Lewin's change process. Because again, I think it's really kind of broad enough to really be applied to kind of any situation. So for the first step is the unfreezing. For me, the unfreezing lasted for 13 or so years in various nursing positions, and basically not really enjoying any of them. And then it took me a long time to decide which nursing practitioner program I wanted to study. I didn't know if I wanted to become I didn't know if I wanted to do family nurse practitioner, what I wanted to do. But after some experience with mental health for myself and for family, I decided to do the psych mental health nurse practitioner track. The moving phase, I think that I'm in the moving phase right now, and I will probably be in the moving phase for the next 5 years or so. But I think the moving phase was finally me applying to graduate school and now taking classes. So I'm about a year in for classes for 5 years, for a total of 5 years, because I want to get my doctorate degree. So I think I'm in the moving process right now, the moving phase right now. And then the refreezing, I think I haven't hit yet, but I think the refreezing will be when I finally graduate from school and when I'm finally employed as a nurse practitioner. And those are a list of my references. And that has been my presentation, and thank you for your time.